Philando Castillo and the Catholic Response, Dismantling Racism Through the Personalism of John Paul II and Martin Luther King Jr. So, in order to shape my presentation tonight according to what Dr. Kidd asked of us, I decided that it would be really appropriate for me to read an excerpt from my foreword to my committee review members in this presentation. So, quote, "My master's essay is the expansion of a final paper I submitted for my independent study in personalist feminism with Dr. Lemons. It is titled, Overcome All Discrimination, Violence, and Exploitation, Personalist Feminisms Called to Dismantle Systemic Racism. In my letter of interest upon arrival to the Catholic Studies Master's Program, I stated that I yearned to connect my anti-racism work and feminism with my Catholic faith, because I felt a huge disconnect between these two spheres of my identity. Unfortunately, race and feminist theory have been developed predominantly from secular spheres. I could sense that they were taboo topics in general, and in the same, it is true in the American Catholic Church. Race is always an uncomfortable topic to the public, and all the public really knows is just secular feminism, so how could they be compatible with my faith? I found no resource in my church or faith community that could help me understand my experiences as a woman of color. But God revealed in my heart that my oppression was real and that my work against racism and sexism is compatible with my Catholic faith. Sure enough, God guided me, and today I am proud to say that I have accomplished that in the CSMA program. In this master's essay, I am bringing in my prior academic background in critical studies of race and ethnicity and reconciling it with Catholic thought. As someone who has worked closely with the City of St. Paul in the district council system, the topic of racial justice trainings and race theories have being applied to better the lives of St. Paul residents was part of my everyday work. Race theory has traditionally come from sociology and other social sciences, with less development within the theology and philosophy disciplines. Therefore, I see a lack of conversation about race at church, and I am sure that many other Catholics have the same experience. I chose to use the Philando Castillo case because it is recent, local, and had a significant involvement from the Catholic Church in its aftermath. This paper is the capstone of the many years that I have theorized about race and worked towards ending racism as a Catholic. My professors confirmed that it's timely. With the recent debates about race after shooting cases like Castillo's and the tensions surrounding the election of President Donald Trump, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has established an ad hoc committee against racism in 2017. The University of St. Thomas President Julie Sullivan is also establishing racial equity efforts this year. Racism is a topic that can no longer be ignored, and the spiritual journey of writing my paper has led me to know many like-minded people." End quote. So my master's essay, in a nutshell, it's a case study of Philando Castillo's shooting. First, giving an account of the case and the split responses from Catholics. Second, looking at how it exemplifies systemic racism. And third, using it as a way to open up discourse on how the Catholic Church could dismantle racism using the lens of St. John Paul II and Martin Luther King Jr.'s personalism. To help you understand my paper, I will have to explain two things to you, the Castillo case and personalism. Just to get a show of hands in here, how many of you have not heard of the Philando Castillo case? Okay, so basically, in a nutshell, it happened here and really close to here at Falcons Heights, Minnesota, just near the State Fair's ground. But it happened in July 2016. A 32-year-old black male, Philando Castillo, was shot 7 times by Officer Geronimo Yanez in the passenger seat, and then in the back of his car was her 4 years old daughter. And so that day, the officer Yanis, he was called to a case at a gas station that was near the area. So 4 days earlier, there was a robbery by two black males, and one of them had a gun and was pointing it at the clerk. And so Yanis saw the surveillance camera of what they looked like. And so that day when he was near that location, he saw Castillo drove by with his girlfriend, and he said, that guy looked at like one of those robbers that's in the surveillance camera. So he decided to follow him. Following him, he stopped him at the stoplight and said, one of your brake lights not working. Can you take out your driver's license and do you have insurance? And so he gives it to him, and then Castillo tells him, by the way, sir, I do have a legal firearm on me. And he says, okay, don't take it out. And so he was reaching, according to the girlfriend, he was reaching for his wallet. But the officer said, no, don't pull it out. He says, I'm not pulling it out. And then you hear the 7 shots. And that was the story. And so after his death then, his mom asked that his funeral service was to be done at the cathedral, even though they were Baptist and he's not a Catholic. So he had he did not have a mass. He had a service at the cathedral, and the archdiocese agreed to do so. There was a split between Catholics on all sides. Some Catholics agreed that it's beautiful that his funeral was held there, and some Catholics said no, his funeral shouldn't have been there. There was also debates on both sides whether racism had anything to do with the shooting at all. So digging into this, it was really interesting to look at Catholics' responses on both sides, and then asking myself, what is the Catholic response to this situation, and then to racism overall. Now to personalism, right? What is personalism? So in my personalist feminism course with Dr. Lemons, I was introduced to the personalism philosophy of Pope John Paul II. Personalism is the philosophy focusing on personhood and the dignity of human life from conception until death. So before he became JP2, Carol, I could never pronounce his last name. Yes. Before becoming the Pope, he built upon French personalism by focusing on person-centered love, known as the personalistic norm. He said, a person is an entity of a sort to which the only proper and adequate way to relate is love. I noticed right away that personalism could be applied to anything that devalues the dignity of humans, right? So if it could be applied to abortion and sexism, it could be applied to racism as well. I saw that JP2's personalism could help dismantle racism both at the micro level, which is person-to-person level, and at the macro level, that is, how it persists in institutions and systems to keep certain groups of people from thriving easier than others. Coincidentally, I also learned in the independent course that Martin Luther King Jr., the well-known advocate against racism during the Civil Rights era, was also a personalist, even though he wasn't Catholic, but his thoughts were useful when thinking about the practical side of dismantling racism. Although John Paul II has never written about racism, his personalist lens on economic injustice in writings like Solicitudo Res Socialis was directly useful to help me analyze Castillo's case and how Catholics should respond to racism overall.
Thank you, Chia. That was really amazing. In our society, both within the church and in secular society, do you hope that your paper will take form elsewhere or lead to discussion elsewhere in some concrete way, or are you maybe not there yet?
I do. I really was thinking about that. And I just like, for example, this year, 2000 in February, earlier 2018, the USCCB, they actually held a conference, and it was focused on immigration, the environment, and on racism. And so yeah, like as I mentioned, them starting the ad hoc committee against racism, I'm like, it just means that there's going to be more and more conversations across the country and archdiocese, and I'm like, well, when that happens, I'm ready to jump in and get my paper going. Yeah. So actually, what I did discover writing my paper was that Archbishop Flynn already wrote a pastoral letter about racism in 2003. And so discovering his thoughts on it, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Our archdiocese was already on this. That's great direction.
I sort of have one question. You
Yes.
talked at several points about the Catholic response to racism.
Mm-hmm.
In your paper, I imagine there's not one Catholic response, but are you sort of trying to map out resources within the tradition that Catholics can use when they're thinking about what kinds of responses are appropriate in various situations?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did look at what the United States Bishop has written for us ever since the segregation era. Like, however, when I said like when there is like a response, like what is the Catholic response to racism? I know that there's only one objective way of looking at it, and that is we all should be against racism, right? Not only does the secular world agree on that, but us as Catholics, who sees everybody in the image of God, most definitely agrees that racism is wrong, and that it devalues the dignity of human beings. And so, like, having the Catholic language to talk about like racism is really what I was hoping like to put down